your question, Jane.
Yes, my question has to do with one area that you're probably very comfortable with: disaster management, disaster risk management. Uh, a lot of people have been concerned that while we do know that we are in a disaster area and we're always hit by disaster, it seems that the budget does not reflect that. Pag-asa is not given enough resources to be able to buy the equipment it will need. There has been a lot of corruption also.
Pag-asa already bought it, actually. That
they
has been
bought.
settled, but it took a lot of time.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that is one. The other one also is on the volcanic eruptions and then the earthquakes. No? But down the road, seeing that Ondoy and Pepeng were things which were not anticipated. I mean, the extent of the disaster was not anticipated. What would you do under your administration to ensure that our country is at least protected or provided the safety nets?
There are several subsidiary plans for that, but it all boils down to one thing. It's resources. How do you get resources in order to finance the needed improvements in what we call climate change adaptation? Would we get it from education? Will we get it from social services and the like? There are complaints that we spend too little on education, in health, in national defense, all because of the fact that we really have limited government revenue. So the first task really is to have more investments in your country so that you can get more public revenue. Because a trade-off can be made on a minute scale, but on a principal scale, there should be more for all. We really cannot. For example, in national defense, for example, dedicated national defense. Right now, it's multi-use national defense where we have to sacrifice one mission for another. We only spend 0.1% of our GDP, which is really low comparatively. In health, we're spending only 3% of GDP, but it's bursting to the seams already. We have 290 billion budget deficit. Fortunately, the recent bond flotation of $1.5 billion was eagerly awaited by investors, and we got $1.5 billion in 20 and 30-year bonds very cheap. Okay. So, for disaster risk reduction, with the caveat that resources are really the most important thing, what do we need to focus on? A lot of focus by a lot of people is on global warming and climate change. But the Philippines produces less than 1% of the world's greenhouse gases. So what should the focus be? The focus should be, because we are victims of climate change and not climate makers, we should focus on climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. What does that mean? Meaning to say that we accept that climatic phenomena will be more erratic, will be more intense, will be more severe. It doesn't happen only here, but in Florida, I think it snowed the other day, or it iced up, and Europe has been seeing record snowstorms, winter storms. So right now, we have to build infrastructure in urban areas and adequately plan rural areas based on available information in a geohazard sort of way, where according to the DENR, 85% of the country has already been geohazard mapped, and only 15% remaining. On those areas not urbanized, we have to have already laid down land use plans, and those should be followed. Because the folly in Metro Manila, if you listen to architect June Palafox, was that the original plan for Manila, done by Daniel Burnham in the 30s, was not followed. Daniel Burnham was saying that Manila should have been an area of limited capacity. The focal point of Manila would be the Pasig River. Developments would be astride the Pasig River, and the development of Manila would be vertical. But after 1946, when we gained our independence, that plan was either shelved or because of ignorance not followed, rather than Paris as a design, as a urban design plan. LA model was followed, where there's sprawling land area, single level, single story bungalows, and a big metropolis. And the result, coupled with the fact that there's a reclamation of more than 1,000 hectares in Manila Bay, which does clog exit points of water from the greater Metro Manila area into Manila Bay, you have what we have. And there are more egregious violations, like what they call the arenda area, lupang arenda, which is part of the lake bed, settled informally and awarded, knowing fully well that it is a lake bed. Several examples can be cited. Now you're going to have to redo that to the tune of 208 billion pesos. There was a metro plan in the 70s, but out of 327 recommendations, only one was followed, and that was the LRT, and they changed the lines. There was the construction of a Mangahan floodway, which is supposed to drain water from the Marikina area into Laguna de Bay, but the corresponding measure that was supposed to have been done alongside that, the construction of a Parañaque spillway, because right now there is only one way for water from Laguna de Bay to drain to Manila Bay, and that is the overloaded Pasig River. So these things have to be redone. Costs a lot of money. Sadly too, safer does not necessarily mean cheaper. Sometimes it means more expensive things. The model would be, in terms of adaptation, to live with the disasters. And the perfect example would be Candaba in Pampanga, where houses in flood-prone areas are really built on tall stilts. And during flood times, when the Candaba swamp is flooded, the bangkas can go straight to the living rooms. Flood times, people make a lot of money through built-in fish areas. It's not flood, they plant rice on fertile soil, and when it doesn't really rain, they plant watermelons. So they have adapted, but that's the exception rather than the rule. So there are also other structural measures that need to be done. Number one is the creation of the new Philippine Disaster Risk Management Agency rather than the NDCC. Number two is to change the paradigm, because under the NDCC law, the local government units are the first and primary responders to any calamity. That's the law. However, we realize that there are two limitations. Number one, the different capacities of the different local government agencies. And number two, the fact that when a disaster strikes a local government area, it immediately becomes incapacitated too. So you have to have a national backbone. The problem with the national backbone is, what is the proper agency? To me, the armed forces can give help, but it is not the proper agency. Why? Because the equipment that you use for disasters are not normally equipment that you would use for military purposes. For example, rubber boats. We don't use that. It could easily be punctured, and we don't use that for our operations. The problem is our acquisition process in the armed forces is covered by what we call the modernization law. All that we can purchase is funded by what we call the modernization law and base proceeds from bases development. And what we can buy is embodied on a list called the several reprioritized lists. That is also approved by Congress. Outside that, we can't buy anything.